Hello and welcome to Visa News. I am Jawad Tehami. Different parts of Pakistan have been in the grip of severe and high flooding, with the province of Punjab being one of the hardest hit, with 1.3 million acres of farmland inundated. It happened because of the unprecedented monsoon and the unprecedented rainfall on one hand, and on the other, the sudden release by India in three rivers including Chenab, Ravi and Satluj. There have been certain estimates regarding as to what sort of an impact these floods are going to have on the overall economy of the country, which has been recently stabilized and put on the right trajectory. It is also being estimated that agriculture sector is going to be one of the hardest hit among many sectors. Also, we saw Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb chaired the steering committee on inflationary trends to review the prices as well also the broader market situation. He has directed the Ministry of National Food Security and the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics to evaluate the available stocks of the essential commodities and also regularly monitor the commodity prices. At the same time, we have seen the United Nations Office for the Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs says, let me quote, less than half of the roughly $11 billion pledges in the wake of floods of 2022 have reached Pakistan, unquote. In today's program, there are three major areas which are going to be up for discussion: the economic impact of these floods, what are the authorities doing at this particular point in time, what exactly is needed to be done during further timeline, and also what could be expected from the international and multilateral organization as well as the international community as far as their support towards Pakistan in its vulnerability towards the adverse impacts of climate change is concerned. For that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Dr. Usman Chohan. He is Advisor Economy at the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Dr. Chohan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to be joined by Mr. Farhan Bukhari. He is Senior Analyst. Mr. Bukhari, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Later on in the show, we'll be joined by another participant. As he joins in, I'll be introducing him as well. Dr. Chohan, let's specifically talk about the overall impact on the economy. It is being, there are certain estimates, there are multiple media reports, there are certain organizations which have come up with the preliminary figures. $1.4 billion is being estimated. Specifically, if I talk about Arif Habib Limited, they've estimated $1.4 billion losses to the economy, especially at a time when the economy has just been stabilized because of the tough measures being put in by the authorities. How do you look at that? And how do you draw the correlation with this recurrent phenomenon of flooding? Back in 2022, we had the flooding of biblical proportions. Billions of dollars of losses were rendered to the economy at that particular time also. And now this estimate, is this particular figure going to be hovering around somewhere here, or are there any other estimates that it might escalate further down in the line?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. As far as this 1.4 billion estimate goes, I think it is a huge understatement. And the reason it is a huge understatement is because it is taken from the narrow lens of equity analysis. So these are equity analysis. I used to be an equity analyst. That's my first job, actually, long back in the day. So equity analysis looks at a very limited sort of immediate term impact on how it should be reflected in the market and the supply chains and that sort of thing. I actually think that the impact can be far larger than just the dollars and cents, and especially 1.4 is a very low estimate. That's because there's at least four ways that this can impact us in the next 3 to 6 months, which is serious stuff. The first is that inflation. So you rightly mentioned that there's a steering committee on inflationary prices. That's very important that they keep a close check on things, because the estimates of the proportion of our crops that have withered away because of the floods is very significant, whether it's cotton, whether it's wheat. So these foodstuffs then translate into the inflationary basket for households, right? So you'll see an immediate thing as the supply gets cut, households will face this. It's a huge portion of the inflationary basket. The second is the employment element. So the relationship between people who own the land and work the land is different, and the people who work the land live in a great deal of precarity, and if their areas underwater or it's destroyed, the next crop comes at an interval, then they struggle a lot more. So there is that class difference and there's a labor thing. The third thing is the reinvestment that is required. I would treat it as an expense because you're just catching up to where you were prior to the flood. So it's not like you're expanding capacity. And given our food security paradigm, I wanted us to expand, improve the yields, expand the acreage. But instead, we're just going to catch up to where we were just 2 months ago. So that, and the fourth thing is that because of this shortage, we may actually have to import more than we had on these basic essential items. So that has a foreign exchange impact as well. These are not being entirely captured from the narrow equity analysis approach. So that's where
right. Mr. Bukhari, what's your understanding when we try to take a stock of how the floods have impacted Pakistan in the past, and especially when we take the example of the floods of 2022, massive economic losses, damage and destruction to a proportion of around $30 billion at that particular point in time. Do you see any sort of similarity this time around as compared to what happened back in 2022?
Look, I don't want to get into the number side of things because it's still too early in the day. The government of Sindh is already predicting a super flood, whatever shape, form it takes in the next few days. By this time next week, we're going to have a clearer picture. Meanwhile, we just don't know how coming rainfall or how the weather is going to play up in the coming days, whether there's going to be more rainfall and the effect of that rainfall on urban and rural Pakistan. So the numbers are up in the air still.
So whatever the estimates are being made right now are the preliminary estimates.
Precisely, exactly. And as I said, it's early in the day, and as Dr. Chohan rightly pointed out, this is something which is going to play out in the coming months. First and foremost are important crops that are planted in the winters just 2-3 months down the line are already in jeopardy. From many places we've seen reports of seed stocked by farmers, saved by farmers, that's been washed away. This is for the next wheat crop. And the wheat crop has been in a crisis mode since last year. The prices of wheat crashed in early 2023, and from that point onwards, it's been a kind of a recurring cycle of loss after loss for farmers. So today's farmer has fewer rupees in his or her pocket than 2 years ago. I mean, that's the reality. Plus, our rice crop last year had given some dividends for at least farmers who had sown a certain variety or varieties of rice and made good money out of it. But this time around, we're already seeing reports of how the flood waters have washed away the transplanted saplings of rice, for want of a better word. So all in all, this is a very grim situation, and I, for one, I've said this at other forums, I've written about this, and I would say again that Pakistan is already in the midst of such a crisis that the entire focus of development should squarely be tied to climate change and population, which is the other point that the finance minister has also mentioned. I don't think going forward for the foreseeable future we can afford large infrastructure projects or other similar things, because this is a matter of life and death for the people of Pakistan. Food insecurity is our #1 challenge today, and it's a much worse, much bigger challenge than what it was before the rains came, before the monsoon rain came this year. So all in all, we need to change the direction of our country, the direction of our policies, our priorities. We just have to head in a very different direction from where we were some months ago, and hopefully down the line, maybe a year, 2 years, few years, we're going to stabilize enough that we can then approach a broader spectrum of development. But right now, it's only climate change, and of course, central to climate change are things like forestry, like agriculture. these are the essential kind of heart of the matter, if you see what I mean.
Right. Dr. Chohan, when we specifically talk about the situation in Punjab, 1.3 million acres of the farmland have been inundated. Is it not unprecedented this time around? Because in the past, in the recent past, we haven't seen the magnitude of water flowing through these three eastern rivers, Chenab, Ravi and Satluj, on such a scale. It's primarily because of the sudden release by India in these particular three eastern rivers. So they have actually rendered a huge damage to the standing crops when we talk about this 1.3 million acres of farmland in Punjab. Historically, how Punjab had been responding to any situation of such a sort?
It's a very important point you're raising. This is not just a natural disaster, it is also a human disaster, and the engineers of this human disaster in Delhi do not realize the damage that they're doing to their own society. You're seeing the flooding is not just relegated to East Punjab and Haryana, but you get videos from Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh. This is very central, very east in their country, and I'm willing to tell you now that this is the final rupture between the Sikhs and the Hindus in East Punjab and Haryana, because the Sikhs are seeing how this engineering of these, they let the spillways, the barrages go, and their holy sites are being profaned. You are aware that in Kartarpur it went up to the first level. That's very close to the river. They're also seeing how the Sikh settlements in East Punjab are being severely affected. The situation is very bad there as it is here. Now, can you weaponize water? Well, first of all, this Indian government put the Indus Water Treaty into abeyance. There is no such thing in the 1960 treaty, and the World Bank has ruled in your favor. They're acting in bad faith because they can't live with the fact that the future of South Asia depends on working together. They don't understand the miracle that is the world's largest population concentration in South Asia. It's desert to the east and it's desert to the west, and it's this river that feeds this life. It's a miracle, and miracles are fragile. But they have a very fragile ego, and they don't have too much going on in their head for them to be able to sabotage, first of all, the relationship of mending a relationship with Pakistan. Forget that. It's just the Sikhs. I think this is the next move in the Khalistan's independence path.
Right, Dr. Chohan, when we talk about the, you already quite in detail, very comprehensively discussed to what sort of an impact flooding of such sort has on the overall economy of the country. When we talk about the secondary repercussions in terms of what sort of an impact it does leave on the soil that it passes through, the irrigation system that comes under its very influence, and also when we talk about the adverse effect which is rendered to the standing crops, ultimately leads to what generally in terms of all these three heads, how the impact is manifested.
This is a very important question because you're going away from the immediacy and looking at it in a larger time scale. So in a larger time scale, I would argue that a lot of the debate we have been having in 2025 should have really happened in 2022. There's lots of lessons to be learned from there. The first thing to realize is that climate change is an utmost reality and we're impacted by it. What is happening is that the Indian Ocean is heating up faster than it historically would, so that it has more erratic monsoons. Because of that, the water hits the Himalayas faster, and it's added with that the glacial melt. So the Himalayas themselves are becoming drier and less icier. All of this is passing through, and we don't have any bulwarks to withstand that vast flow, and neither does India. Nobody can really handle this volume of water, but it is so significant that you have to do your best to mitigate. Now, in that, there is actually some upside to this sort of flooding, which is that in a subsequent harvest, the groundwater levels rise and it's more fertile. So you saw that in that upturn in 2023 from the 2022 floods, but still we cannot count on one year's crop being destroyed and the next one being more bountiful. It's really not a way to do agriculture. And agriculture has a very significant part of our GDP, and more so labor. So it's about 25 to 30% of our GDP, but it is 50% of our labor. This is where we're employing people, and their precarity of having basically no job for a year is terrible. I mean, it actually decimates their households. There is a lot of mental anguish in the downtrodden of our rural areas. Partly it has to do with the way we budget. You know, that the last very nice discussion we had about this, the provincial capitals, the metropolis holding most of the budget, and doesn't go down to the local governments. So once we delve into that, I get a lot of inputs from people who are on the ground in the field, and they say that the destitution is really stark. This is what we're looking at in terms of the human as well as the climactic elements with this disaster.
When it comes to the agricultural lands, the farmlands, huge swathes of land which are adjacent or along those waterways, the bigger rivers. We've got very elaborate irrigation system as well. But when such type of phenomenon recurs, this flooding happens, what are your recommendations? What could be done? I mean, the settlements around that water body or the waterway, in order to cultivate all those lands, somehow, no matter how much harder you try to, make those settlements far away, but there is a certain number of heads who have to be there, right? And when it comes to the damage and destruction that is accrued to the standing crops, they're pretty much dependent on water as well.
Absolutely.
So what is the remedy? What's the way forward?
Yes, okay.
How can you, I mean, in simple understanding, how can you take the crops away from where the water source is?
Absolutely, and take the people away from that. It's not so easy, but there's four broad things that we have to work on. One is to pakka karna, to solidify the canal system, to make it more robust. There has been erosion because it's an ancient system. It comes back from at least the 1850s, so it needs to be renewed. The second is to expand the canal system out towards desert areas so they have more absorptive capacity out there, and then you actually make more land arable from that. The third is to avoid housing societies on riverbeds. I mean, can you imagine how ridiculous the idea is to build a fancy housing society on a riverbed? That's what we're doing. So more enforcement of the planning. I know that the laws existed and I know that there was reticence to have it, but ultimately people cave in to capitalism, and so we have to have that too. And the fourth is to have a stronger case for climate financing, because there is money sloshing around internationally for purposes like this. The observers abroad see this, but then they don't see the case brought to them with that, a very rigorous costing of what is happening down to the very nitty-gritty, and saying this is how we will spend it in these areas, and we can leverage that financing. It exists for a reason.
Right, we are honored to be joined by another participant, Mr. Sharif, is senior economist, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Atif, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Atif, as per your understanding, with this recurrent phenomenon of flooding, Pakistan has been witnessing for over the years and years now. Punjab has been one of the hardest hit, and we know for a fact that 1.3 million acres of farmland have been inundated because of this particular severe flooding, most primarily because of the sudden releases from Indian side. But at the end of the day, downstream, we had to bear the brunt of it, the damage and destruction that was accrued towards Pakistan's Punjab. Now, what sort of remedies come to your mind? Now, we've talked at length about what sort of damage and destruction that happens in terms of to the overall economy of the country. What are your recommendations? How should we strategize in the future to deal with this particular calamity if it happens again?
For sure. First of all, a very excellent discussion today between yourself and your other panelists. If just as you were speaking, something and forgive me, something very positive came about for Pakistan. A signing of a treaty between U.S. and the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So congratulations on that. And the reason I point that out is because that is going to go a long way towards even contributing towards the rebuilding of the infrastructure that is damaged by the flooding. We are going to need a lot of help from the Western nations towards the rebuilding of Pakistan. After this, and on our food basket has been damaged. Punjab has been damaged. So there is that. Of course, there is this issue of we could, someone said the definition of wisdom is the anticipation of consequences. We should have anticipated these consequences 38 years ago when we got the largest flood, 2022, as you folks were discussing. We could have always, but it's always easy to be sort of, as they say, to do like after the game, like Monday morning quarterbacking, as they say here, like after the game saying that's where we should have thrown the ball. So, but a few things that we can do right now is, of course, first of all, the communication system has to be no, these are very implementable, doable things. I'm not going to go into so what happened with the US treaty during the course of your program just now is going to go a long way towards rebuilding, and they're going to need a lot of help from our Western partners. Number two, the communication infrastructure all across the country to warn and caution the agricultural community of any upcoming floods so they can prepare better. And I want to say this. As a developing country, as any country, Pakistan has done an amazing job of dealing with this. I remember a few years ago when this happened in the U.S. in during Katrina floods. Even that was devastating to an extent that is way worse than even Pakistan right now. So we have actually done a very good job being faced with such a monumental calamity. But the communication infrastructure has to be better. Number two, as we talk right now, I have had my communication with insurance companies in the West who are ready to insure against floods in Pakistan. And that system has to come into place. We have to appreciate the reality of the fact that this would happen. Now, what would happen in this kind of a scenario is, yeah, these insurance companies that I've been talking to say, okay, well, this happened a few years. They have their own analytics team to calculate what it is, but any farmer would be happy to pay a very small amount to ensure that this kind of a situation does not wreck him or her financially and wipes them off, like unfortunately might happen in some cases right now. One thing I want to commend the Pakistan response with is the limited loss of life. I know a lot of cattle has been washed away, but the loss of life, even one is too much, but has been limited. So there are these silver linings to these very, very dark clouds. So what I would say is better infrastructure, help from the West, insurance programs, and of course the better water management in the future is something that we need to implement right now.
Better management of water. Do we understand that we need to build large dams, or if we go about building smaller dams, that is going to be more viable as compared to going for bigger dams, which is going to cost us more. It is going to take considerable time, of course, at the same time.
The great thing with smaller dams is that, to be honest with you, what the places that have these smaller dams, these what they do is they don't let, how in most dried up rivers they've made townships and sold them off. With these smaller floods, the control is not that massive as well. So there is water keeps flowing wherever it naturally flows to a lighter extent. So what we as human beings cannot do is build townships where water's natural path is as well. Because when these larger dams burst, and what is happening back in India is, and then the water is released from there, then that leads to way larger sort of devastation. So, to your point of larger versus smaller, and the bureaucracy involved in a larger dam, and so Pakistan used to be the number one canal system in the whole world. We need to repair our canal systems or our canals. And in our canal system, 70% of our canal water is being wasted right now. So again, the water management and
Right, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Canal system.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mr.
just
Shiko
our
Atif, there
canal
was one
system.
point.
Over 70.
Mr. Shiko Atif, there was one point that was raised by Dr. Usman Chohan, that we need to have a strong case for climate financing. Now, there were pledges around $11 billion in the wake of 2022 floods, which were made by the international organizations and major powers at that particular point in time. And the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that less than half of that particular amount which was pledged at that particular time has been received by Pakistan. Why the organizations which pledged to that particular amount, or the countries which were involved in that particular pledge, did not or could not live up to their promise? Are there any sort of internal economic pressures when we specifically talk about the countries in question, and why those organizations or the multilateral institutions couldn't live up to their promise?
For sure. So there is, to be honest with you, there is empathy fatigue as well, all across the developed world. You know, they're like these incidents of tremendous human devastation, unfortunately, happen, and then there are a few nations that everyone looks to, and you know, they are very generous. They do their best, but if you look closely behind the curtain, the largest contributor to any of these international organizations, may it be the United Nations, may it be, you know, Red Cross, may it be other organizations, the largest contributor to their coffers ends up being the United States. And hence my point earlier on as well, you know, there are unfortunately behind these donations as well, there is a political reality behind the curtain. And that's why, you know, when you folks were having a very intelligent discussion about this, and you know, just as you were speaking, that agreement between the Prime Minister.
I get your point, Mr. Shiko Atif, senior economist, joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for taking time out. Mr. Farhan Bukhari, what could be expected from the international community after 2022 floods? We saw Pakistan spearheaded a campaign, sensitize the international community about the vulnerability of those countries which have been badly affected because of the adverse impacts of climate change, the loss and damage fund, and then Pakistan came up with that 4RF framework at the same time. Pakistan has been raising this particular issue at previous COPs as well. Now, this pledge which was made towards Pakistan, at that particular point in time, there were two flash appeals by the United Nations also made. And very, I mean, not that considerable amount was received in terms of that particular flash appeal as well. And these particular pledges of 11 billion. Now, the UN says less than half of that has been received. What could be expected at this particular point in time? Because by looking at that very statement Mr. Antonio Guterres made at that particular time when he visited Pakistan, he said it's not the matter of charity, but it's a matter of climate justice. So to whom we should actually look up to?
Look, we all know the sad truth is that in the international environment, morality and justice are words that are good for speeches, but they don't really translate into real life action. That is the tragedy, the sad truth. Plus, we are in a year where the US, the United States under President Trump, has cut back large amounts of funding to the UN system. The US aid, which was quite active here in the past in Pakistan, has been shut down completely. Plus also there is a view, and I've heard this from several people who know this stuff better than I do, that come peace in Ukraine, which may happen in the coming weeks, the coming months, the Europeans, the US, others are primarily going to channel their funds for the reconstruction of Ukraine. So climate justice for Pakistan after the latest climate-related disaster, sadly, unfortunately and tragically for us, is not really going to encourage much money to come across for us. we have to fend for ourselves by and large. Of course, we can't turn away international funds that come to us.
What are those two quicker measures that Pakistani authorities need to take if we have to deal with this particular sort of an issue at our own?
As I said earlier on, number one, absolute must that we have to suspend all other works in the area of development and focus on this almost entirely, because this is really a matter of life and death for Pakistan's survival. And secondly, there's been so much talk about agriculture, but let's not forget we have rapidly depleted our forest cover. And that has, in very large measure, in very large part,
I get your point, Mr. Farhan.
contributed
Sorry
to this
to cut you
situation.
short over here. Senior analyst joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for being on the show. Dr. Usman Chohan, advisor economy at the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.